teachers! Today we're talking about how to teach the musical moment in F minor, that's number 5 by Franz Schubert. It sounds like this. Great piece if you have a student who wants to play loud chords and lots of octaves. I've had many teenagers who just enjoy the sound of this kind of piece. Schubert wrote many other short pieces like this. And one of the reasons I love the noble waltzes in particular and these musical moments is that they pack a lot of musical punch in a short amount of time. So I'm looking at this in my Henley text of the complete impromptus and complete musical moments, or Moment Musicaux if you want to say it in French. I think the story goes that Schubert made that title up and it had to be corrected at some point. I'm not sure that that's actually a French term. Anyway, there are about 3 of these that I teach to high schoolers. The number 3, also in F minor. And then the number 6 is so beautiful. And all of these are mature works that maybe our high school students or recreational adults aren't going to play as artistically as, a recording artist. And that's okay because there's still something technical to work on in them. And as I said, they're short enough that you can really focus on the things you need to focus on. I also find number 5 in particular to be a good preparation for bigger romantic works, such as a Chopin bigger Polonaise or maybe even a ballade, because you're just isolating the idea of playing with this big warm sound on these big chords. So yes, the big chords, that's one of the big main features of this piece. And then the short duration and just this general character that seems so Schubertian to us is what this piece says to me. So what do our students need to know in order to be able to play this? First of all, we're in F minor, and we're beyond the point of just needing to read in F minor. We need to understand harmonically some basics about F minor, such as the difference between natural minor and harmonic minor, that E natural makes the C major chord for the dominant. We also have some forays into the relative major of A flat major, and then we have quite a few other modulations throughout this. So your student needs to have at least a very basic understanding of how chords in the key of F minor function and be able to analyze some other chords because we have so many weird modulations through this, particularly in my edition, the second half of the first page. There's just a lot of accidentals. So your student needs to be able to read those accurately and kind of have an understanding of harmonically what's going on. Otherwise, it's just going to turn into a whole bunch of notes that they have to read individually and don't make sense in the grander scheme. So I do want to talk about how to practice that second half of the first page first. I'm particularly thinking about measure 34 down to about 57. I have pop chord symbols written in my edition because I was just working on this with a student and we were labeling what's going on harmonically. So if I start at 34, that's G flat major. I'm blocking the entire measure together next to B minor, and then this diminished chord over F sharp takes us to an F sharp sus, which is kind of like the 5 of B minor. And so that creates that 4-bar phrase. I would definitely block those, either in whole measure or in quarter note pulses like this. And then the next 2 measures are the same harmony repeated, that diminished over F sharp. And then Schubert does that again with another 6-bar phrase, 4 plus 2, just transposed to a different place. So G major to C minor, etc. I strongly recommend that your student have some analysis here of seeing the 4-bar phrase followed by the 2-bar phrase to make this 6-measure group, and then another 4 plus 2 to make another 6-measure group. And then starting in 46, again we have these 6-measure groupings. Keys get even a little more weird. So we've got 4, move, plus 2. And then another 4, plus 2. And somehow kind of ending there on C major takes us back, sort of. We finally feel like we're kind of headed back towards F minor. One of my favorite parts of the piece is in 68 when you have this long buildup. And that's like, how satisfying is that after that long modulation that doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense in our ears, and then after this long, even in unison line before 76, we've arrived back at the beginning. So have a little fun with your students. Make sure they're not just laboring over all the accidentals and the chords and where am I harmonically. Help them understand that this is a long progression that just ups the anticipation of returning to F minor and to that main theme that they stated at the beginning. One other note just about learning accurately and reading this, the classic place for students to mess up, either in learning or in memorization, is when things start the same, but then instead of doing the same thing, they diverge 2 different ways. And so measure 9 after this goes here, but over in measure 84, it's different. So 82, we go here in order to stay in F minor. So that would be similar to a sonatina that, diverges to the dominant in the exposition and then goes to the tonic in the recap. Same idea. So your students need to practice those sets of measures back to back so they understand first time does this, second time does this. Okay, so one of the big things to address in this piece that hopefully your student already has some experience on is octave and big chord technique. And so the way that I teach this is to do an octave scale very slowly. And this is not the first thing I do. We might have smaller intervals or that we've done before this, and broken octaves, which you don't have to be in as wide of a span. You can rotate back and forth. But for specifically blocked octaves, I do octave scale with time in between each octave to go back to a natural hand shape. If you sit and hang your arms at your side, your hands should, if you're relaxed and you're not holding your muscles, they should go into the natural hand shape, which looks something like this. And for me, on the keyboard, that's about a span of a fifth, not a span of an octave. So you're contracting back into that natural shape between octaves. I'm going to do F minor, since that's the key that we're in. And you can start that with number 5 on black keys. If you prefer 4, then you can move to doing that, which is what I prefer. Okay, once they've got that and they understand the principle of stretching out and then contracting back in, then they can go a little faster, and the relaxation moment might be just quicker and maybe not quite as dramatic. Show my students that I can do this at a very fast speed, and I'm not holding my hands in a claw hand position or a locked position. That's what we would definitely want to avoid when our students start playing bigger intervals. It's not good for them because they'll hurt if they hold that for a long time, and it's not good for their sound. If you are in a locked position, your sound is naturally more harsh and abrasive. And so particularly for something like Schubert, not Prokofiev maybe, for Schubert we want a warmer sound and a full round sound. And so that's part of the reason for working on moving back into your natural hand shape between. The other way to get the big warm sound is by making sure you're using natural arm weight, that you're not holding any muscles up here, 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 anywhere, but you're just allowing the natural weight of your arms coming all the way from the top to create the sound at the piano. I'm not forcing any of that. I'm just simply letting it drop. So for those of you who use Piano Safari, you know, the lion paw technique that we started at the very beginning of just learning basic arm weight drop, that's what we're doing at an early advanced level in a piece like this. Okay, don't let your students forget, even though they're playing all those big chords and octaves, that there's still phrases to be shaped. So it's worth singing or just isolating just the melody, which is just a normal 4-bar phrase. It should have a little bit of a peak and then a resolution, a taper off. The exception to this is the end of this first section of this piece where we have 4 chords which all have the wedge staccato on top of them. And so I think you want to give a little more punch to that and not do as much of a taper. Although I do believe that last downbeat is the most important. So from here to the most dissonant or tension-filled chord to there, and then maybe back off a little bit on the dominant there. We have many other places for accents in this piece, and many of them are these big leaps, which brings me to my next point that I want to make with you. It is very important that students have a practice strategy for leaping up to these chords. So at measure 22, they have to get there very quickly. There's no time to move. So one of the ways it helps to practice is to jump there but not play it out loud, just play it silently. Like that. And then I like to use Elvina Pierce's play prepare practice strategy. If you don't know the name Elvina Pierce, she's a lovely teacher who trained with Francis Clark, so all the Francis Clark people know her name, but she might be less familiar to some of you. She wrote a book called The Success Factor in Piano Teaching, Making Practice Perfect. And a lot of the practice tips that I share with you are things that are in this book that I learned from her. I've had the privilege of hearing her speak live many times because she lives near me. So anyway, I commend that book to you, and I'll put a link in the description of the video below. But all that to say, play prepare is where you're prepared not only for the next chord, but the one after that. So when I'm playing the 6th, I'm prepared for this chord and the one beyond. I'm not allowed to play this chord until I'm ready for the next one. So you can see I'm putting my hands immediately on the next chord, and I can't move until I'm ready for the one after that. So I know it's a little complicated. It takes a little time to try this technique, but the basic principle is don't play any chords until you're ready for the next one and possibly the one after that. Students tend to read what's right in front of them and not really plan for what's coming next. So you can just isolate those jumps. Another example of this is at measure 61. So we have, again, a very big leap. They've got to know where this is and then approaching it. So do that faster. That's a really big one. My student who is working on this right now spent a week really working on that particular jump, and he got it. He can totally play it in tempo right now. So it can be done, but you do have to isolate it, and don't just hope that over time it'll, gradually get better. You have to practice it. Okay, so we have 2 trademark Schubert things in this piece that show up in so much of his mature output. And so it's really important that our students recognize those and have fun with them. The first is these massive, very fast dynamic changes. All over the place. It goes from fortissimo to piano and back to fortissimo. And there's no crescendo or diminuendo in between. So the word juxtaposition means 2 contrasting ideas or things placed right up next to each other with no mediation. So forte and piano with no diminuendo in between. It just goes from one to the other. The best way that I know to practice that is to insert a rest or a pause that you're not going to actually put there when you perform. That just helps your hands set. So if I start at the beginning, forte. Wait, set my hands. Wait. And then gradually as you practice, you just make that rest shorter and shorter until it doesn't exist anymore. But in the meantime, you've trained your hands to be ready and start with the new dynamic right on time. Very important in Beethoven and Schubert. Start the new dynamic exactly on time. Don't anticipate it and do it too early and don't be late because you weren't ready to change on time. That takes practice in this. And then the other Schubert trademark is this shift from a minor key to the parallel major. So from F minor to F major. We get these A naturals at the end here. There's one of those other dynamic shifts right there. That's measure 102, where it becomes forte again. And so students need to know that this is something that Schubert does all the time and engage their imaginations in this. Why did he end this piece with the last two lines in major? I don't know, but maybe your student wants to come up with a story that explains what's happening in the music. When I've taught this, students have come up with the idea, this theme of, is somebody, chasing someone else, maybe through a dark woods on a horse. It does have, if you go fast enough, it has a little bit of a galloping feel to it. And maybe the good guys are victorious at the end with this last chord. I don't know. You can have fun thinking about that with your student. But Schubert evokes so much imagination for me, and so much of it is because of the harmony choices that he made. So make sure you're enjoying that with your students and analyzing it well. I hope this gives you some ideas on how to teach this musical moment by Schubert. I hope you enjoy Schubert with your students. He's one of my absolute favorites. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Hit the like button. And if you found this video helpful, share it with a piano teacher friend. Best wishes in all your teaching.